Hey guys, still here. Today we have a 10v10 tactical. This is Mudfight. Now, the one that sent this replay in was Eurobro, but he said that I should be focusing on John the Mighty because John is going to do something that is very interesting. We're going to see that slightly later on in this review, or sorry, replay. Now, this replay started out with all sorts of attack markers, and this is a good thing, because now you know where your allies are going and what they're bringing. But when you see markers like these, Naked Platypus bringing in two A10s, I'm thinking, okay, the A10 generally isn't that good. At least, yes, it can kill tanks with pretty good accuracy. But it's not that good against infantry, because it can only do strafing runs. It's not very survivable, it's quite slow. So this unit, it's not ideal. Now Eurobro himself is going on the right flank. We have GP8 over here. This is Rumenahi. And John himself is going to bring the F-18C Hornet. He also has, of course, a command unit, just as everybody else. And it's always a question, where do you leave these things? There's only so many zones to capture. And where do you park your CV? Every now and then I try to make my CV go all the way around, and at some point I started out in Bravo. Had my CV go the scenic route, and a CV of course being a wheeled vehicle has a pretty good mobility. I started out there, drove along the road, right through the mountains, all the way over here. I ended up over here. Unchallenged. I actually almost made it into the cap circle. Anyways, back to this particular game. Two A10s in the middle means that you're going to be lacking firepower somewhere. We have FM moving this way, so this is USFM. Also flanker VN going here. He put up a help marker. I'm not sure if he actually will be sending units here. But with two A10s and one FA-18C on the back basically, or as an attack aircraft, we might be a little light on some areas. And this is exactly what you're going to see during these games, where you're expecting your teammates to bring a tank, and then they don't bring any. This can really ruin your game. It can really make a big hole in your lines that, if the enemy finds it, can really quickly end the game. So instead of the actual 50 minutes, you might be playing it out in, I don't know, 20 minutes, 35-ish, something between that, if they find that hole in your lines. Now he immediately sends out the Hornet. This of course is one of those good Hornets with the very accurate anti-tank missiles. 50-50, 30 AP, it carries 4 of them on fire and forget, so you don't need to keep this jet around. And if you really wanted to, you could still have this thing come in as an anti-air unit. Although with just 2 AIM-9Ms, despite their good accuracy, and with a decent turning radius of 400, I would much prefer to keep this thing as an anti-tank unit. Not so much as an anti-air unit. Now the first couple of volunteers are up, and unfortunately the Maverick just narrowly scaves above the unit and manages to completely miss the target. This of course has to do with the random roll chances that Wargame gives you. The enemy also has a Hornet. This is the F-18C, commanded by Schwegel, and he's not actually going to pursue any of our aircraft at the moment. Now, John the Mighty also has some units here on the left. We have a couple of Humvees transporting some infantry, and by the looks of it, very high veterancy infantry. As we also have some other units. This is USFM-11, who's going to be deploying some units towards the left here, but not really any fighting forces on the front line yet. This front line is currently being held by Stingers and Mistral from flanker VN. I suppose he still has to use his Delta Force and his Navy SEALs to move up. Now quite a few CVs already spotted. We have one standard UAZ and, interestingly, a T-80 UK. It's already being used in a very offensive role, already took a hit. So if that F-18C is back up, and here it is, we could be looking at a kill. He's doing some aerobatics, and instead of going towards the area on the left, he has to deal with this incursion on the right flank, where this guy, quickly moved up his forces thanks to a couple of BMP-1s, he's not using particularly expensive units, to try and rush his way into this town. Now, this is a tactic that I found very interesting, because you could argue, well, this is never going to work. Maybe. But you could always try, and there's a decent chance that Blue has not brought a super heavy, like they didn't do this round. There's just no super heavy here, so there's no unit that can adequately deal with these transports. And the infantry then can make its way all the way to these buildings and start pushing out the RBS-70, potentially the RBS-56. The only thing that's really stopping them so far is autocannons from the 302As. So there's really not that much firepower here. There's also a little bit of artillery landing on it from the Makhmat, and we have some defensive units here, for example the Bedouins from Eurobro, a Shanam from Eurobro, a couple of Maglans, and not much else. Unfortunately the Maglans can keep enemy tanks at bay, but the only thing we've seen so far here is a T-90, so it shouldn't be that much of an issue. Now, a couple more infantry units are quickly being brought up here, but look how close these Motostrelki actually get before they're being dropped off. This is how weak this blue position is at the moment. So fortunately, we have some LHVs coming up. And yes, these are reservists, but it's better than nothing. And especially with the combination of their transports, they should be able to lay down enough fire to make sure that these guys are not going to be an issue for too much longer. There's a V-150 from DEFCON coming in, also armed with a machine gun. It's always a question, what do you do with these things? But if you get too close, you're going to get killed off. But inside a town, you're going to have to, otherwise you're not going to be effective. We also have another V-150 coming in. This is the 90mm variant. This is Blair. And Blair is going to be a very uncapable driver, for one. But he's also going to be doing a very, very interesting thing later on in the game. Now, as you can see, there's not too much happening on the right flank, except for that incursion over here. Normally you do see some reconnaissance skirmishes here, maybe aircraft flying over and anti-air shooting back at them. But that's not really going on at the moment. Interestingly, it seems that Red has not really dedicated that many forces to this flank. Where they have dedicated quite a few forces is over here. T-55, a couple of BMP 685s, a couple of Pinsgauers, some transports here, which means there's probably going to be quite a bit of resistance coming from this town. And in the meanwhile, we have the Delta forces from John over here, moving around the side, trying to get a good flanking position and potentially encircle infantry here, so that once they're panicked and trying to run off, they're going to be cut off by the Delta forces here. Now, Blair, in his V-150 90mm, is still sitting here, and so far, they're not moving up yet, because they simply don't have the firepower to do so. They do have a bit of recon, actually they have quite a lot of recon on this end, but the enemy still has a good amount of units which are defending this tree line, and of course, quite a few aircraft, as you can see. So far, the Su-27 PU has been hit, so it should be out of action for at least a while. And hopefully that should open up the skies for the A-10s, insofar as they haven't been shot down yet. And actually, let's see. Naked Platypus, this is the guy who had the two A-10s, has scored no points yet. Now, of course, that doesn't really say anything, because he could still have done damage to units, which were then killed off by somebody else. But I don't really think that the two A-10s are a good opening. Now the Hornet is coming in as quickly as it possibly can to potentially intercept these units here and maybe do some ground damage, but that's when the other Hornet pops in, fires off a missile, hits the F-18 and narrowly gets the kill before John's Hornet actually managed to evac. Unfortunately, that is the anti-tank jet down. But as John is going to show us a little later in this game, you don't always need a heavy aircraft like that to deal with a super heavy tank. Now, these T-59s are not, and yes, I know they're ZTC-59s, well, I believe they're just Type 59s. They're not having a very good day, taking some cluster artillery fire here. It's coming all the way from the back of the base here. It's a LAR 160 as well as a MAR 240. Now these guys are the ones that are armed with napalm, and they actually have a pretty decent range at that. 12.5 kilometers, or 12 and 250, which is way better, of course, than the Buratino. Now the US forces here have arrived on the edge of the woods, and they're now trying to make their way onto a couple of mortars, which were interestingly parked pretty close to the front line here. Unfortunately, Delta Force is also taking fire from the command tank, which has actually survived. And over here he has to fall back, because it is just too much of a leap to try and get from here to there at the moment. You could try to use these tree lines and sneak around and then hop over the road. But then you're on this side and there's really little way to retreat. Now so far Blue has scored 1560 points versus 480 on Red. And I gotta say I was quite surprised, because I saw quite a few glaring weaknesses in Blue Force lines over here. But so far they haven't really been able to find these weaknesses or make use of them. Now Syria 30 comes in. I'm not sure what it's trying to kill off. Is it really gonna go for a couple of M41A1s? Or is it just circling as bait? I'm not sure. Now we do have a T-90S spotted there, so moving up with any sort of unit might be complicated, as for now. So this area is completely locked down by that tank, and potentially anti-air units as well, although we haven't really tested the waters here that much. We do know where the T-80UK is. It is still on the front line, still ready to kill off anything that makes a move on these tree lines. So there's really not that much that any of these guys can do, short of shooting down a Syria 30, that is. Now, this is where the battle gets interesting. The T-90S has gotten hit and lost its optics for 120 seconds. So this is Blair's moment to shine. Blair is armed with a Cockerel Mark III. It has an 8 AP power gun, kinetic, which means that it won't do tremendous amounts of damage at range, but the closer you get, the more damage you do. And here's the T-90. He's already managed to shoot it in the side once. And so far, he's actually found a different target, killing off an anti-air unit over there. So he keeps moving forward, gets the aft of the T-90S, and kills it. That is how you do it. 20-point unit versus a 170-point tank. Blair has done his job and is immediately backing off, afraid of what else might be in this tree line. But this was pretty damn impressive. Just driving up to that tank, shooting it in the rear, and then moving off again. So do not discount the V-150. It can come back to bite you. And of course, with the kill, the unit suddenly got a promotion from, I think, trained all the way up to elite. Through, well, actually 2 kills, okay. Now, he got the tank and he got the HQ-61, the AA unit. So that's Blair in the V-150 90mm. So with this position weakened, it should be pretty easy to keep moving up. And actually Blair made the right call here, not moving in, because he would have been killed off by the Liren over here. Thanks to the machine gun and the Cockerel Mark III, he now has a very good suppressive fire laid down here. And so much so that JP-8's Maglans actually managed to survive. Bit of artillery fire going on the return there, but Blair is no longer there. Already managed to drive off. Now the left side of the map still has the Delta Force standing by. We saw the V-150, but now we even have a Leclerc. Leclerc has fired off quite a few rounds. It only has 15 rounds remaining. It has fired off 15 rounds and has 7 rounds remaining. And is now standing by to deal damage to anything that gets too close. Unfortunately, the Jalo at this range can be quite a devastating unit. Because at this range, it is going to have a pretty high amount of armor piercing. And as such, a pretty high amount of damaging power. So the Leclerc is not quite safe in moving up. Unfortunately, I think that John over here moved his Humvees up too far. And they're now getting wiped out by the Jalo. Not exactly sure what he's trying to do. Maybe bite or trying to lure in some ATGMs or something. So far this Humvee has managed to stay alive, but that's about it. Blair, on the other side of the map, is still alive. He has fired off a couple of rounds, is now taking on resupplies, and is ready to go. And as these things barely use any fuel, they have an autonomy of 650, they just can keep it up for hours and hours. These are not units that you have to worry about too much for resupplying. And you could argue that it might not even be worth it to resupply them, because they're only worth 20 points. So, where's the next offensive going to be? Well, everywhere basically. We have this flank, which is being pressed closer and closer to Red 4. We have the middle of the map, where a couple of 302As are attacking anything they can see with their autocannon. We have a Merkava 3D Baz from Eurobro coming up, as well as Spider from Rumina Hui. And this position has been captured by 2 CVs, but so far they have not been able to find the command unit that is capturing this area for Red. So far they're not actually getting any income from it. Now, time to light up the place here. Napalm comes in, tries to stun or burn as many units as possible. And the T-80 UK is now on a killing spree, together with the Scots. Scots getting way too close to the Delta Force and getting killed off. The Claire managed to get the Jalo, and then ducks back into cover, after having been repaired by, I think, this Mancati over here. And we still have the T-80 UK there, we just can't see it. So the Leclerc ducks back into cover before he happens to get killed off by an anti-tank unit. So he's now asking, can you spot the tank? Where is the thing? A Humvee is not really the right unit to spot it. It's only going to see one bit of the tank, and that's the last gun that it, or the last shell that it fires. What it did find was 30 commandos, or commandosi. So we need to find these guys and kill them off as well. And meanwhile, John the Mighty on the left is landing a couple of further offensive units here. We have Frogs landing Delta Force, and what is this Frog carrying further Delta Force? Now the Delta Force have seen quite some changes since they were first introduced into the game. I believe that originally in European Escalation, these guys were carrying flashbangs. Flashbangs or frag hand grenades. Not exactly sure, it's been so long. Then, in Wargame Red Dragon, they were, for a long time, one of the weaker units, because they simply didn't have the firepower to kill off enemy tanks. After a while that has been changed, and these guys now carry the Carl Gustaf M2, and finally they have a pretty reliable anti-tank solution. As well, of course, as their MP5 SD and their M60E3. Now J35 FS comes in, tries to get the Delta Force. Delta Force are panicked, but so far still alive. They have not been hit, but that impact did come rather close. On the right flank, we have been moving up a lot. Magellan's are still trying to punish anything that gets too close, such as this ZTS-63. And we still have Blair, our main character here in the middle of the map. T-80 UK has once again been spotted. I believe that this is still the same T-80 UK from MRAC. And the Maglans are trying to deal damage to anything they can see. And we have a kill on the T-80 there. Did it reverse away from the impact? Yep, that's the engine block. It was reversing away from the Maglans. It was moving away from the Maglans in standard maneuvers, so the Maglans actually got a kill by killing, or by hitting in the weak spot, so the aft of the vehicle. Time for the Super Cobra to come in. Manages to now get immediately shot down. I was hoping for something else there. Super Cobra, again, one of those units that has been changed quite a lot. It used to be carrying anti-air missiles, or air-to-air missiles, but that's been changed. And it now carries seed missiles, so that's suppression of enemy air defenses. Which is interesting, because that's one of the only, I believe it is the only helicopter for Blue 4 that actually gets the ability to kill off enemy radar installations or enemy AA units. Now Blair dashes forward yet again. Unfortunately this time the T-80 that he's chasing does not have optical failures. It does not have problems, but it has been able to kill off yet another AA unit there. He's taken a good hit, and unfortunately the BMP 685 has been able to take him out. War Daddy Carter 4747 manages to take out our Blair. But Blair has done a significant amount of damage. And so much so that you're going to be quite impressed with that unit once you see the kill list of it. And so ends the tale of Blair here. Now the battle is almost over. Most of Red 4 so far has left the game. And of course there's not really that much that Red 4 can still do. So let's just speed this up a bit as we make our way through the final zone into Bravo, where there is still quite a bit of killing to be done. Now these Magellans might have expended all of their spike MR ammunition, but if they can capture the fob, there we go, they can just take on some new spikes. Of course, immediately an aircraft comes in, tries to kill off their own fob, making it so that all of these units from blue cannot reinforce from here. And in fact that is not too bad of a choice, because it would make reinforcements and especially resupplies quite more extensive work for blue 4. But so far they have been able to capture it and hold it, and it looks like the J-35 is still hell-bent on trying to kill something, and they actually managed to get away with it. They killed off the Magellans over there. Unfortunately, we'll not be able to tell the tale and go home as it gets shot down by one of the AA units that are still guarding the middle of the map here. And I think it was the Chenov 2 from Eurobro. Now, we have nothing less than a Stug 3 over here, also known as the Stormy. Delta Force slugging it out against a unit that has been left behind from 1944. Unfortunately, these units, even if they are from 1944, they still pack a punch. And even with just 2 points of HE, they can do an incredible amount of damage, albeit over time, to the units that they're fighting. They just won't survive against, and this might be a bit of overkill, a Maverick missile from the F-16A. So that's one of his Delta forces killed off, but the others are still there. He's bringing in some new Black Hawks to reinforce these positions. Although you could argue that they're not really going to be required. Eurobro manages to push up. Look at this tank. This thing has seen some fighting. Fired off 6 main gun rounds, 4 missiles. Almost all of its ammunition, almost all of its fuel has been used. It looks like it took a good hit. And so far it's making a pretty dangerous move here, exposing the weaker side of the tank to anything that might be inside those buildings. And yes, it has 11 side armor, but you just need one aircraft that gets lucky to hit the side of this tank, and you're still going to be looking at a pretty expensive Israeli scrap heap. Now so far, Navy SEALs going up close. Pato Branchiers still entrenched in these buildings. Navy SEALs are actually panicked, interestingly. They haven't fired off that much of their ammunition yet. And we got a pretty ballsy Chinook coming in here. Now, the Chinook is armed just with 1 minigun. You can see it sticking out there from the right of the vehicle. It's every time trying to line up, and once it gets close enough, the target has died, unfortunately. So let's see what else we can find, because we have managed to kill off everything in this zone. So where exactly is that last unit? Where is the command unit? And of course this is always the hunt for the command. You never quite know where these guys are going to be. They could be hiding in these trees, but for all you know they might be hiding all the way back there. Somebody's just trying to grief the rest of the team and trying to keep them waiting forever and ever. So far we're just going to speed this thing up, because hunting down one final command vehicle is really not that interesting to watch. And they have finally managed to find it over there. So that was John the Mighty. 617 points in kills, 280 points in losses. Most of these points are of course the loss of his aircraft, the F-18. And unfortunately, the enemy F-18 was able to kill him off rather early. Otherwise that F-18 could have done quite a bit more damage. Now, let's have a look at Blair in his V-150. Managed to kill off an HQ-7. This alone is 60 points, so 3 times the value of the V-150. The T-90S is, I believe, 170 points. So far he's been able to kill 230 points and then another 85 points for the Buck M1. So he killed well over 300 points, making this guy 15 times his own point investment. So 15 times the 20 points that you're paying for it. Now that is one effective unit. As for the rest of the match, of course, it was not played that well by Red 4. And it's not so much about the gameplay this time around as it was about this very, very courageous V-150 who just charged a super heavy tank when he saw the opportunity to do so, and he got the better of it. He actually managed to kill off the T-90. So don't underestimate these little buggers, as if you do, you might find that your very expensive units get killed off by a very, very cheap unit. Anyway, that's it for this replay. If you want to send in your own replay, be sure to use the link in the description. You can land up on my site where you can then transmit the replay that you want me to look at. As for the rest, I hope you enjoyed this replay. Let me know what your thoughts are down below, and I'll see you soon for more videos.